Hearing none, we'll close communications in the audience, turn it over to our general manager for the consent items.
Good afternoon. Just a reminder for everybody, again, the mics tonight here are not active all the time, so in order to get your information out there where people at home are able to hear you, please hit it once and you see the light come on, your microphone, and then hit it again when when you're done talking to turn it back off. So great to be with you this afternoon. We have 5 items on the consent agenda. Item 4A is approval, a request for approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 9 and the special meeting of February 23, 2026. Item 4B is a request to accept the granting of an easement from Restlawn for the Maple Woods cottages at 740 College Avenue, and that's for access to sanitary sewer services. Item 4C is a request to accept the granting of an easement and an associated bill of sale from Electric Steel LLC for access to water main at 50 East 64th Street, and this is subject to approval as to form by the City Attorney's Office. Item 4D is a request to accept for a bill of sale and again an associated easement from 24 East Limited Dividend Housing Association Limited Partnership for sewer and water utilities at the Home Flats Apartments, pending approvals to form by the City Attorney's Office. And then finally, 4E is a request to approve an amendment to the contract with CTC Technology. They're our owner's engineer for the broadband Holland City Fiber project. That's to extend the term of the agreement through June 30, 2027, pending approval as to form by the City Attorney's Office. And that's those are the items on consent this afternoon.
Could we have a motion to approve the consent items?
Motion to approve the consent items.
Second.
Motion by Enberg, second by Lilly. Any questions on any of the consent items? All in favor? Opposed? The consent items are approved. On to major project updates.
All right, pleased to say we have 2 closeout memos this afternoon. First one up here on the list is for the Southwest Heights water main replacement, Phase 2. And I believe Brian Ritchie's coming up to address that. I'll let Brian talk about this important project kind of down here by 28th in Wildwood area. So, Brian, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening. So yeah, as Dave mentioned, this is Phase 2 Southwest Heights. So if you remember a couple years ago in 23, we had the first phase, which captured the area just south of the high school. So this continued that from basically Ottawa to almost Michigan, between 32nd and 28th there. So captured quite a bit of main replacement with this one. This was a project that we had Milbacher and Sons doing for us. It replaced approximately 9,000 feet of aging 6-inch cast water main. So mostly replacing 6-inch with a small amount of 12-inch on Washington, and replacing with 8-inch ductile iron pipe. This also replaced 76 lead and galvanized services, following the Eagle standards with that. And then also 39 Orangeburg replacements, which was a proactive measure just because of the nature of the Orangeburg laterals that we would be undermining with the water main replacement. We went ahead and replaced a number of those just within the right-of-way to mitigate any issues with that, with those pipes collapsing. And there were also some roadway and drainage improvements that the City Transportation Department participated in as well. Some things to point out with this. So there was a plan to line the water main between, it was a narrow right-of-way stretch between Harrison and Fairhill Court, just because of access. Lining it was our best option. Unbeknownst to us, the as-bills didn't show there were 2 90-degree bends in this main, so we were unable to do so. Fortunately, there were no services on this main, and we had actually removed those services off of it from the first phase, so we did not need to keep this water main active. So the decision was to throw a valve at the end of it, and if we needed to do anything in the future as far as directionally drilling something new, we had the ability to do so. So that's why you see a significant cost difference, or at least a portion of the reason there is due to that. In addition to the lining not happening, there was also within the original budget some planned work that the city was going to be doing for Apple and Brookside Avenue. That was part of the $5.5 million budget that was taken out of there. City was not ready to do it this year, so just kind of a floating item that's still out there. So that's why you see the major difference in where the budget came in at the city's, or I'm sorry, the BPW share of $4.02 million, which included $3.7 million for construction and $324,000 for engineering services. So if you look through here, the first one, if you scroll down there, Becky, shows the map of the hashed area where we captured main replacement this past year. Everything north of that up to the school there was phase one. So this was basically double the size of phase one. This was originally planned to be a 2 to 3 phase project. We were fortunately able to get this done in just 2 phases. So if you go down there, it shows a tie-in here, water main tie-in at the south end of the project. That's at Cleveland and 32nd. So tying the new 8-inch main into the existing 6-inch main. And then we have our contractor putting in a new copper service onto the main. And then again, another tie-in here at 30th and Van Raalte. Not very exciting pictures here, but I tried. This is a new hydrant install, if you've never seen it before, so that kind of shows you the hydrant lead with the valve there in between. Just kind of gives you a snapshot of what that looks like. And then the next one here is showing you what a new sanitary tap looks like. So this would have been for the Orangeburg replacements that we did, a new tap run with 6-inch PVC. I think that's what the next photo captures, is that 6-inch PVC running from the main to the right-of-way. And that pretty much sums that one up. Any questions?
No, it looks good. Thank you. On that main, was that covering some plastic that covers the pipe, the ductile pipe, for corrosion purposes, or?
Yeah, so all of our new main is wrapped. It's poly-wrapped ductile iron pipe. So that's our spec. That's our standard. Yep. So all the new main was poly-wrapped ductile.
Okay.
Yep.
And that became the standard last how many years?
That's been a standard for a while now.
For a while.
Yeah, and it's also run with tracer wire and was tested and passed, so it all locates well. Taking as many of those measures as we can.
Early 90s.
Was it? Say, goes back quite a ways.
Thanks, Brian. I know you're sticking around, I think, for the second one as
Yep.
well. The next one here is for the 17th Street lift station. Remember, we waited quite a while to find somebody that brought in a bid that was going to be within kind of what we thought was a reasonable approach here, and it's one of our bigger lift stations, so we're glad to be able to get this one closed out and behind us as well. So I'll let you talk in more detail about what happened here.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so as Dave mentioned, this one had been out there for a while. Just the way this station is set up in a single building, it's constructed in such that there's a wet side where the wet well is, the flow coming in, and then the dry side, we call it, where the pumps and electrical and controls are on that side. So this was something we wanted to stay within the constraints of the site, which was pretty tight as it was. The building itself was in good condition. There were a few replacements we'd done to the roof to really just give the building a facelift, more or less. But the bulk of the work was mechanical and electrical upgrades. So the station was originally constructed in '61, had some rehab work in the late '80s, but it had really the older style design with the motors that sit up on the first floor and have drive shafts that run down to the pumps themselves, which was a maintenance headache for our guys. So that was one of the main things we wanted to address with this, and we're able to. And then just, again, a number of controls and electrical upgrades, and obviously the pumps to go with it. So the approach was really just to address those minor repairs to the building, but also making sure that we're still staying within our standards of the type of pumps we're using, getting the controls that we're able to by upgrading what those look like, and I'll show you some pictures here in a minute to explain that a little better. So with this, we also added some VFDs, variable frequency drives, that it did not have before. So that helps us with being able to slow start these pumps and soft stop them. And then we also added the addition of an insert magnetic flow meter as well to be able to determine flow through the station, what we're getting. And then also we added some enhanced safety features. So with the wet well being technically inside of a building, you know, obviously there's concerns of H2S and understanding the corrosive environment that it provides. So there was some H2S monitoring equipment that was added that was not there before. So those are actually all brought in through our SCADA network too. So we have the ability to see what's going on. If you drive by the site, you'll see lights outside now where it has green, meaning it's okay to enter. If it's yellow, something needs to be checked out, and obviously red would be do not enter. So again, just some enhanced safety measures that we did not have before. So overall, the project came in under budget after a few enhancements of the budget, but I'm happy to say we came in under budget at 1.995 million of the 2.076 approved. And yeah, if you want to go to the first photo here, so I'm kind of showing the old versus the new here. On the left, the old, the right, the new. So those small motors there on the little bases are what we were trying to get rid of. Again, just kind of not only a tripping hazard up there, but more so the maintenance headaches that they provided. So we got those out of there with the pump and motor now down on the base floor. And then you can kind of see on the left of your picture there is one of the VFDs. There's another picture later that shows all three, and then some HVAC upgrades with that as well. And then here is looking at the far pump configuration. That's the left one is the existing, where you see the yellow cage coming down as the drive shaft. You can see that's not on the new pump there, shown on the right. So again, just trying to provide some enhancements for operations and being able to maintain these pumps much easier now. And then again, just kind of another look at that, showing what we went from and to. That's actually the exact same pump this picture is. So you can see we have pressure gauges on there on the discharge side now. That's easy to see. Air relief that actually has hose run down to it to be able to relieve air, not spray back at us. Check valves, everything replaced from the pump all the way up to where it discharges just above that in the force main discharge pipe. And then kind of another one here. This was through construction there on the left with everything kind of demoed out of there. On the right there, you see the 3 new VFDs where there did not used to be anything, just one control panel. And then here's another one through construction here. This was after the wet well was pumped down on the left, and they were starting to clean it out. And then the right is kind of before we reintroduced flow back to it. So we had the suction piping. That's the red pipe you see there lined. We had a few spots of the wet well actually lined too, but for overall condition of the wet well was actually fairly good for how old it was. Yeah, I just thought that was a cool picture to show. There's the bypass setup operation there on the left. And then again, just kind of showing construction of the new pumps being put in and everything working on the mechanical side of installing the pumps and piping. And then here is, again, just some updated controls. We have our flow meter. That's the one in the middle there. And then the left is our radar HMI screen to be able to view what the level is of the wet well. And then the right is our HMI screen that connects with our PLC. Provides, again, just kind of paints the picture of what the wet well looks like, the floats, how it's talking, which pump is being called to run, just really can tell you anything you want to know about how the station's operating, and allows you to control to be able to do it here on the screen. And then again, just the outside of the building there with the lights I was talking about. Right side is dry side where pumps are at. Left side is the wet well where all the flow is coming in. I think that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Also, on our website again and on your SharePoint site, we have the major project updates and those project updates. Otherwise, the only thing I would really highlight this month, again, we're trying to get to final or get to substantial completion of fiber hoods number 10 and 11 in the Heights area this month so that we can get customers hooked up in that area. We just had just under 3,800 customers as of March 2 receiving service on our fiber to the home network, our shared gigabit network there on the Holland City Fiber Network. And so that's continuing to make progress. Number 7, major overhaul. Again, some of that major equipment is due back in late April. So we'll start that reassembly process, get ready for the summer season operation there for our peaking station for electric generation. And then just a note again, our mediation on the digester is coming up here next Wednesday. So a week from this Wednesday is our mediation date. So hopefully be able to make progress there towards the remedy associated with some of the conveyance issues on the digester. And then we mentioned earlier on that the customer service area is moving along well, so get you more updates as we get closer to being able to get back in there. So that's what I really had to cover on major project updates this afternoon, unless anybody had a question on something they saw on the list.
Hearing none, thank you.
All right. We'll move on then to item 6, which is a financial review. In your packet this afternoon are the financials for January. And our finance director, Janessa Carter, is coming up here to give you a brief overview of the financials. So Janessa, I'll let you take it from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. Oh, can you guys hear me? Make sure I'm close enough. So this is the financials through January. Not a quarter end, so we kept it really high level. Just kind of noted some of the changes since we last talked. So starting with electric here, one thing to note that's a little bit of a theme throughout all 4 utilities is that January was a 3 pay period payroll month. So you will see a little bit of variation in payroll expenses because of that. So for electric posted a net position for January of approximately negative $732,000, but it did maintain a strong fiscal year-to-date net position of $14.6 million, with $8.3 million favorable to budget overall. So on the revenue side, January revenue again exceeded budget by $1.23 million, about 14%. That's driven again primarily by the industrial and residential usage, same kind of story that we've talked about the last couple of quarters as well. Other income was also higher in January due to some timing of contract rental revenue too. Fiscal year to date remains strong, $5.5 million above budget for revenue, and again with that industrial usage being the primary driver here. Operating expenses were unfavorable for January, and that's our largest driver for the picture for the month for electric. That was coming in approximately $1.9 million over budget. It did maintain a favorable fiscal year to date by about $884,000 or about 2%. The biggest driver again was fuel and purchase power costs. I know Joel, I don't know if you want to come up and talk through some of the nuanced detail with the hedging. This is primarily related to those big winter storm months as well, or weeks in January too. Go ahead.
Yeah, just thought give a little update on Winter Storm Fern, because that's really the driver on that variance that you see on the fuel and purchase power. So maybe backing up a little bit, you'll recall going into a fiscal year, we have a requirement in our hedge plan to be 90% hedged for the year. Now, one of the key words there is for the year. There is some variation from month to month, although actually for January we were about 87% hedged. The main reason for being a little short there, winter is kind of an interesting time with hedging just because of gas prices. The basis for those months for our delivery point versus like the other side of the state tends to run about $1, $1.50 different, and we don't see that Normally, in practice, normally the pricing is the same. So we tended to hedge a little lighter in the winter, but again, 87% versus the 90, we're pretty close to right there. Just to give you a little perspective on what happened during that event and just kind of how pricing went. So our hedge price for January is about $3. It's $3.51 per decatherm is what we had pre-purchased kind of that gas for. During the storm event, which was January 23rd through the 27th, on the 23rd, that price went up to $23 a decatherm. The 24th through 26th, it went up to $49 a decatherm. And actually on the 27th, it was at $75 a decatherm. We saw similar things happen, obviously, on the power market, where we might expect to be around 30, 40, well, probably closer to $40 a megawatt hour. We were seeing $200 to $500 a megawatt hour through much of that period. On the 24th, there was actually a maximum gen alert where you have to run everything you can run. At that point, it was up over $1,000 per megawatt hour. That's kind of the floor for pricing at that point. So to give you an idea of what's going on, at the same time, because of everything that was going on, we had an operational flow order from the gas provider. What's that mean? That means that we can't get any gas that we don't buy the day in advance, and we have to stick exactly to the dispatch that we plan. So that kind of becomes a problem when you get a max gen alert and you can't get the gas to run the unit. So we actually had to place our Unit 9 in outage during the storm as unavailable because we couldn't get gas to run it when called. That deviation you see, I went back and looked. I mentioned based on our forecasted dispatch, we were 87% hedged. Based on what actually occurred that day, we were 84% hedged. So we had 16% exposed. That's what really created that difference that you see. It's the combination of gas we purchased and energy we purchased. And it was about half and half. So backing up to Winter Storm Uri a few years ago, in that case, we actually got hit pretty hard because we had purchased gas to run, and I mentioned this difference in pricing between the two sides of the state. In that case, the west side of the state, where we purchased, the price of gas skyrocketed up. On the east side of the state, it didn't. So the prices for energy during that period were driven more by the gas prices on the east side of the state, so our cost to generate was much higher, and we actually took a hit because of that. So in this case, we kind of played it a little more conservative, and we did about half of that gap with gas purchase and about half of it with market purchase. And to be honest, the way it kind of fleshed out, they ended up being very close this time. So I think all in all, the hedge plan worked, but you see even what that small exposure can create as far as a variance. Dave, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add or.
No, we just thought it'd be good to kind of follow up with the particulars, given the fact that, that storm had occurred and there was some pretty significant both operational issues that had happened, as Joel talked about, the operational flow orders, but then also the pricing, that kind of came out of that. And fortunately, I guess, the hedge program, the level that we do have, saved our exposure significantly more than what it could have been, obviously, and we're still looking really good year to date. The other thing I would say on the year to date, is that, again, a lot of that is volumetric based. So, we are also serving more demand than what we had planned on. So part of that operating expense is in service to the additional revenue that we're also getting. So, year to date actually looks, very strong from a operating income and a net position standpoint yet. It's just that January was a tough last week of January primarily. And so fortunately, I think we're out of some extreme weather at this point, but it tells you what winter storms can do from time to time.
Very good. Any questions on that, or hand it back over to Janessa?
It kind of just plays out the importance of the hedging,
Oh,
quite
absolutely.
obviously. And when items like this occur, obviously that's an operating expense, but sometimes in accounting, if it's infrequent and unusual, you might call it like an extraordinary expense.
Sure, yeah.
In this case, it's infrequent, but maybe not extraordinary. I mean, these things do happen when,
Yeah, and I think, as Joel kind of mentioned too, they're planned for, I think, more in January as well too. And year to date, everything is looking great too. So if you had a big variation year to date where it was really throwing off your financials, then you would. It would certainly be something to call out as extraordinary and atypical. But I think it was planned for, but also, again, just really solidifies how critical that hedge program is. So in addition to that revenue offset that Dave just mentioned too, where we are also seeing an increase in revenue with the volumetric increase in expenses as well. Other income is also helping to create a positive story for electric too. Investment income continues to remain strong for the year. And again, that's more so, it's doing well, but it's also conservatively budgeted. So each month you'll see that there's a bigger variance between budget and actual for the investment income. That's really just because it's a conservative estimate for rates and investments each month too. But still, investment income remaining strong. It's about 1.75 million favorable year to date for electric too. So overall, electric net position is $8.3 million over budget for the fiscal year to date. So good, strong message. Performing well financially. Revenue remains above expectations, and then primarily driven by that industrial demand. And while January did experience some higher supply costs, year to date is ahead of budget. So doing well. Moving on to broadband, making sure you were there, Becky. It looks like you might be. Perfect, thanks. Net position for January for broadband was $33,000. Big difference in materiality threshold here between electric and broadband. That's about $39,000 below budget, but fiscal year to date, again, remaining very strong at about $316,000 or $88,000 over budget. On the revenue side, the fiber internet service continues to perform well. That's up $11,000 over budget in January, and then $84,000 fiscal year to date. And then one thing that I always try to point out here is that you're going to continue to see some of that transition between revenue types as Holland City Fiber becomes more available. You'll see some of that move from probably the active Ethernet service as well to different, revenue types here. Operating expenses were over budget for January, but that's primarily driven by maintenance and permit fees, which is actually related to the pole attachment cost from last year. We had some good discussion today in our exec staff on managing that with maybe an accrual for this calendar year too, since it all hit in 1 month. Maintenance contract costs remain high as additional work infrastructure is brought online, but overall operating expenses remain close to budget. So again, overall, broadband's net position is about $88,000 positive year to date, and they continue to show steady improvement as additional fiber service areas come online, and revenue growth is continuing to build while expenses remain manageable. Looking at water next. Net position decreased by about $68,000 for January. However, fiscal year to date remains strong again, $4.3 million or $1.1 million over budget. For revenue, the total revenue for January is about $40,000 above budget, with the fiscal year to date revenue about $419,000, favorable as well. Higher usage is really spread among residential, commercial, and industrial customers, which continues to drive that positive revenue trend. Wholesale revenue also remains modestly favorable year to date as well. Expenses were over budget for water this month by about $310,000. One of the examples for that was the timing of distribution system maintenance work. For example, we had a $196,000 Millbach contract that kind of came through. This is related to the lead service line replacements too. So it's really the timing of when this work is accounted for. Again, year to date, their expenses remain about $324,000 below budget, which is really reflective of what's kind of going on with the timing of when these accounting differences incur. Again, same story here. Other income, investment income continues to also help outperform and help contribute to a favorable variance year to date. That's up by about $245,000 over budget. And then also trunkage and assessment revenue is remaining strong too over budget as well, which is also conservatively budgeted, but a good reflection of at least the ongoing development activity that's taking place right now. So bottom line, net position is about $4.3 million year to date, which is $1.07 million above budget. Nice strong financial position again, no concerns or flags in water either. While January did show a temporarily unfavorable month, it's really timing of when these expenses hit. And then lastly is wastewater. Wastewater posted a net position for January of about $199,000. Again, maintaining that strong fiscal year to date of just under $1 million. But it's also about $1.2 million favorable over budget year to date too. Total revenue for January came in over budget, again, driven by industrial sales tied to the LG meter issue. That issue has been partially resolved, I guess. It's being mitigated now by doing manual meter reads, is my understanding, as they work on kind of fixing that too. But that did contribute to some of those large surcharge income in the past months as well. Quick reminder again, if you look at fiscal year to date, that wholesale revenue is down that $395,000, and that's due to that annual true up that we've talked about the last couple months with the NSA. That took place in November and December, but you'll see it in the fiscal year to date columns. Operating expenses continue to trend under budget, with January about $127,000 under, and approximately $664,000 favorable year to date. Again, favorable variances are spread across several areas, most of which due to timing, collections, operations, and treatment chemicals, as well as biosolids costs that mostly due to timing of when those are accounted for. So we'll probably see that in future months as well. And then I know we've talked about this a couple of times too, but admin and general expenses are spread based on a distribution percentage, and the budget was slightly different than the actual, so that just results in a little bit of a variance each month. Overall, again, investment income continues to also be a nice contributing factor here. Again, $212,000 favorable to variance, and then trunkage revenue also remains strong in this utility too. So overall, favorable fiscal year to date, net position by about $1.2 million through January, and good strong revenue and disciplined expense management. So really no concerns in wastewater either. Any questions for anyone?
Any questions on the financials?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janessa. All right, we're going to move on down to the regular agenda items tonight. There's a couple items coming out of Pete Byers' group, but I think this first one was written by Nate, but I think Brian is addressing it, right? Okay, so Brian's coming up again. Related to, we just covered the closeout of a very large project. Now we're talking about going into the next very large project. So we're working in chunks of $5 million, I think, generally on our projects here. So
You got it.
You got another checkbook coming your way. So go ahead, Brian, take it on.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so as Dave mentioned, this is kind of the next water main replacement project for us. A little different area that we're targeting in the 8th and Waverly corridor area, where it's capturing both some distribution main replacement as well as some transmission main replacement. So this project addresses 50s to 70s, both cast iron main, and then of the transmission main, some pre-stressed concrete dating back to the 40s. So the scope of the work is replacing roughly 3,000 feet of 12-inch cast iron main. So it's some larger distribution main that we'll be tackling with this one. So that's from 8th to, from 31 to Paw Paw on 8th Street, and then on Waverly from 8th to 13th. And then also on Waverly, we're doing some work to the transmission main, which comes in under the highway there on 10th Street, and replacing from 10th to 13th. And it's actually tying into a transmission main project we did back in 2016, 2017, and tying into that new main there. So it's a larger main replacement project, less service work associated with this one, but it's also tackling some areas where we have concerns with redundancy. So this is kind of in a corner of our pressure zone where we're actually going to also be extending, or I should say adding main to the ground pressure district to the north of, north of 8th on Waverly, since that's the only feed to that area up there basically by Chicago Drive. This provides some redundancy there to again account for the number of breaks that we've had over the span of this main being in service. And then also adding distribution main south along Waverly to again provide some more redundancy there. So the portion of main that we're replacing is mainly along 8th and Waverly, and then we're actually getting into, this paints a little better picture for you here. So what you see in yellow is open cut replacement. So again, like I said, from 31 to just past Pawpaw, and then down Waverly south from 8th to 13th. And then those green segments that you see there are actually planned for horizontal directly drilling new main. So along Pawpaw there is abandoning existing 6-inch and drilling in new 8-inch. We're again trying to minimize the footprint in terms of the main replacement for this area. We found that this would be the most cost-effective way for this stretch of main to replace. So that's going to be actually the first part of this project, is starting with that just before tulip time. After tulip time, we'll come into, if you want to leave it there, Becky, we'll come into Waverly and do the next HDD portion, which is that other green segment going north. Again, that's providing some redundancy for that area of the system. Again, no services on that stretch, just going to be a dual main that's feeding that portion of the system. And then again, after that, they will jump to Waverly and then work their way along 8th over to 8th Street. So this project is also in tandem with some city improvements along 8th Street, which includes adding bike lanes, carrying on from what the township added before, and then some reorientation of lanes for travel. So the city has a roughly 15% accountability for construction costs. So for this project in particular, we did bid this out to several local area contractors that we've worked with in the past. We received 2 bids for this one, one from Milbacher and one from Wyoming Excavators. Milbacher being the low bid at $4.76 million. And I should state too, we did also include an alternate within this to be able to capture a portion of Holland Heights. That was our hope, that with the budget we had, we could do a portion of that. Unfortunately, with the pricing we got, we're sticking to just the base bid of it, knowing that we have that kind of in our back pocket if there is budget availability there to do some work into Holland Heights, just kind of in that west corner by Pawpaw and 8th there. So this is for a request for approval of a contract with Milbacher and Sons of $4.76 million with a 10% contingency of $476,612. So a total amount for $5,242,741.85.
Could we have a motion on that recommendation?
Motion to approve a construction contract with Milbacher and Sons in the amount of $4.766,128.95 with a 10% contingency of $476,612.90 for a total authorized amount of $5,242,741.85, pending approval as to form by the city attorney.
Support.
It's a motion by Enberg, supported by Lynn. Discussion?
Question on Waverly, the northern piece there.
Mhm.
Will all lanes be shut down or will it be limited?
No, so they're going to be on the west shoulder drilling in the new main. So it'll hopefully just be a shoulder closure, at the very most a lane closure. And we're talking, since it's a new main, there's no temporary service, and it's limited impact in terms of what they're actually needing to do. There will be a portion when they're drilling because the main that they're connecting into north of Waverly is on the east side of Waverly there. So there will be a short portion where they might have a lane closure there where they're doing the tie-in for it. But the drilling itself is really just going to be a shoulder closure, similar to like what you saw with the pipe bursting project, but even a smaller footprint because there's no existing main that we need to account for in terms of providing temporary service. So that limits the footprint as well.
And those businesses along that area, they don't have services coming off this?
They do. That's from the other distribution main that feeds the so that's a separation zone between the two pressure zones in our system. Yes.
There will be a period though where 8th and Waverly, because of the intersection work, will be shut down. The city is also doing paving outside of this extent of this project on a different contract, so that will impact Waverly. And then Holland Township, north of Chicago, north of the river actually, is doing a force main project this summer as well. So I guess that'd be 120th will also be shut down for their work. So north, south, and Waverly will be busy for most of the summer.
Tis the season.
Yeah, Brian, maybe you can just characterize 2 out of 21 bids responsive. So is that an indication of our timing, busyness of the other contractors, or the nature of our job? Maybe I don't know if you have a sense.
I think it's the latter two. It's the timing of when this was bid, and just contractor availability. We had talked with a few contractors that we've worked with before, and we're happy to be working with Milbacher again. They've done a lot of work for us, and we're happy with their work. A lot of the contractors we sent it to, I shouldn't say a lot. Probably half of them we hadn't worked with before, just came recommended by other engineering firms. Just again, wanted to kind of cast a little wider net to get some interest. But yeah, again, very happy with Milbacher and Sons bid.
We did lose 2 of our regular contractors, I should say. Lost being, so K&R has decided to primarily focus on large diameter pipe, and so they weren't interested in the smaller diameter of this project, so that's kind of been a business decision for them. And then we did not extend an offer for proposals to a contractor that we'd used the last couple of years based on their past performance. So otherwise, we might have received 2 additional bids if this had been bid 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You mentioned there was an alternate and decided that you weren't going to elect to use it due to budget or due to funds.
Yes.
Was there an established budget that you're comparing this to that you were targeting at?
Yeah, so from the water main replacement budget of $5 million, that's where this was restrained to, I guess I should say. Yes. Yep.
Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes.
Thanks, Brian. Next item, 7B. Remember, we have had in our plans to do transmission inspections, especially of some of our concrete transmission main, and but actually this is something that will give us a full picture here as our plans for the entire or a good portion of our network, frankly. We've got to make some preparations to make sure that that goes well, and that's what tonight is about. Pete is here to talk to us about a couple things that we need to do to accommodate that transmission inspection activity. So Pete, I'll turn it over to you for more details on it.
Yeah, thank you. So if you remember, we have a contract with HDR Engineering, who will be supporting Insight Technologies, who's the owner of the actual inspection tool for this inspection. They came out last fall and did a kind of phase 1 field assessment. They'd looked at as-built and our records before, but did a boots on the ground assessment to really get visual on every single point of interest. That was kind of one goal. The other goal was to determine the exact location where the tool was going to be captured and extracted out of the pipe. So there's 2 aspects that came out of this that require some additional work. The first is on the kind of west side of the system, closer to the treatment plant. We knew there was a vault that is on that main that housed a flow meter at some point in time. We weren't aware of the fact that the flow meter equipment was left in the pipe when it was abandoned. So HDR was able to get into that vault and verify that there's a Venturi tube inside of that transmission main right now that constricts down that we use for differential pressure measurement to measure the flow going through there, but that constriction would prohibit the tool from passing. So one item of work that we need to tackle is removing that venturi tube out of the pipe and replacing it with a new spool piece of pipe that's the same diameter as the rest. The other aspect is the capture of the tool. So the initial project assumed that we can navigate the tool into small diameter distribution main, just excavate that and take the tool out of there. It can essentially shove itself into a 12-inch pipe, and the wings kind of fold in, and then it gets captured against a valve. We can do that, we discovered, on the south side of the system on the 32nd Street transmission main. But on the north side of the system, there was some concerns with getting it through the aerial crossing over the Mactaw River. There's a vertical sweep there to go from underground above ground. And after looking at it, HDR determined that there was too much risk that the tool might not flow up and over or hit that sweep and kind of jackknife on itself. That sweep, we also discovered, is in a monolithic block of concrete. So if something does happen, we can't get at that pipe to extract it very well. So instead of being able to continue on down Pine Street and capture it somewhere down in Pine, we now have to create an extraction point on the north side of the river there in Howard Avenue, which is nice because we don't have to get into river. We can capture it just off of River Avenue, where the pharmacy is there, if you remember going right across. So that requires excavating the pipe. There's a specialized tap that we can put on it, a tapping tee that'll create a 20-inch tap on there, and then that'll all be placed inside of a vault as well. Just because of the amount of cover, once that tapping tee sticks up off the top of that pipe, there's some heavy traffic in terms of like trash trucks and buses that go through there, so we want to have a vault over it to protect that and to give us future access as well. So those two items add up to about $305,000 of work. That wasn't in part of the original project because we didn't really know about the venturi, and we were hoping for the distribution capture, not the transmission capture. We did issue a engineering service agreement with Spalding de Decker to support the design of those structures as well. So the $305,000 construction plus the engineering services plus a contingency for this construction gives us a total of $350,000 of need that isn't in the current capital plan. So this recommendation you have in front of you is for a construction services agreement with Milbacher to complete that work, and then do a budget amendment of $350,000 to allow us to do that. We only have a couple contractors that have worked on this large transmission main before, this concrete main in particular. It can be a very finicky beast, and you really want somebody that has experience with concrete main working on it. K&R and Milbacher were the local ones that have experience with that and have touched our specific pipe before. K&R is tied up on the Wyoming transmission main project right now, and indicated they were not interested in providing bids for us this year. So Milbacher is thankfully available. They are ready to work on the Heights project, but this slips in line nicely before tulip time for them to tackle this at the same time. So they ended up providing a proposal that met the schedule needs. The inspection itself, or the work to make these modifications, is planned for April, and then the inspection would happen immediately after tulip time, that the 12th or 13th, I think. So any questions on that I can answer.
The concrete, can you kind of describe that concrete mains? They're various diameters, and are they reinforced? And
Yeah, so on our transmission side, they range from 36 down to 30 inches, kind of the main concrete system in terms of footage. There's two types to it: embedded cylinder pipe and line cylinder pipe. So it's a concrete main in name. The strength and structure comes from a steel cylinder itself, and so that's what's providing the resistance to the water pressure. What the difference is what happens outside of that steel cylinder. There's a reinforcing wire that's spun around that under tension, similar to reinforced concrete would be. The difference is whether that steel wire rests against the steel cylinder, being line cylinder pipe, or whether that there's a layer of concrete between that wire and the steel cylinder, being embedded cylinder pipe. There's a mortar lining on the inside of there to provide some corrosion protection as well, and so on the inside of the steel cylinder. So those are the two differences. The embedded cylinder pipe is our 1950s, which is on the north side, and then the line cylinder pipe is The 70s pipe that we've mentioned before is kind of a pipe of concern that's on the south side. So the inspection's going to do the north side in May here, and then we have budgeted for the south side inspection this fall. This construction work will allow us to get it done for both of them. The flow meter impacts the southern inspection, and then the Howard Ave work impacts the northern inspection.
Could we have a motion on these recommendations?
I motion that we approve the water capital budget amendment in the amount of $350,000 and approve a construction services agreement with Vilbacher and Sons in the amount of $305,000 with a contingency of $16,000 for a total of $321,000 pending approval and form from the city attorney.
Support.
The motion's by Lily, supported by Lynn. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's approved.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
While I'm up here, if I can just do a quick plug, we do
Yeah.
have some new faces in our group that I'd like to just make you aware of. So Bruce Karlstrom is our newest hire. He comes to us from Spalding to Decker, a great addition to our engineering team. And then Dave mentioned Nate Greisen as well. We stole him from the water plant back in '24, but he's currently working on his construction project management degree and has had a really heavy hand on the 8th and Waverly project. So we're excited to have them both on board. You might see them up here in the future.
Great team. Thanks, Pete. We'll move on to item 7C. Before we kind of kick that off here, as Janessa's coming up, just a couple words of thanks, I think, through this whole process of budgeting. Setting a budget is a very important effort on the part of an organization to kind of map out a plan of activities for the year, and your policies establish that our financial plan needs to support and be aligned with our strategic plan in the organization. We start a budget process to try to align with that among all of our different department managers, really back to late October, early November timeframe. We're starting to work on this budget. It is a very thoughtful process, one that takes a lot of effort, and it's not just based upon last year's numbers, but it's truly a kind of a built-up budget based upon what's needed to execute that strategic plan and to keep our assets in good shape in each of our utility areas. And that builds to an evaluation that ultimately our board has assigned a subcommittee, PJ and Brian, to spend time with this, and I want to thank them for their efforts in going into more of a deep dive on some of the activities that are embedded into this budget. Also want to thank, again, in addition to the department managers, I want to thank Janessa and her team for taking and pulling all this information together and not just mapping out the 1 year, but also looking at it over a 5-year time frame so that we can get a really good sense of how our revenue is lining up with the needs of the utility in ways that we can convey to those that are receiving our services what they might expect. And I think because of that diligence, we've been able to be very consistent and clear about some of those expectations and also the rationale why. This year we wanted to even build further upon that. And one of the things that we wanted to do is make something that was more easily digestible by our customers and by our community. And it's also in a big thank you to Keith and Lynn at the city in terms of things that they've done as sort of leading the way on creating documents that really help people understand kind of the connections that exist between service levels and the budget, that goes into it. And so tonight, what Janessa is really going to be taking you through, because we've already in detail at our study session walked through a lot of the numbers in each of the budget areas in detail. And again, we didn't shy away from that. That exists as attachments. We have our budget book attached. We have another PowerPoint attached. But tonight, really, we're going to spend time talking about a budget in brief. And a budget in brief is something that the city's been doing for quite a while and I think works well to give a good overview of what is in the budget from an operating and capital perspective, and also maybe tie it into a little bit more of the why that's behind that and how it sort of relates into the service levels that our customers have come to expect. Also want to thank, and I know Janessa would as well, but thank our communications team. Julie DeCook and her team did a lot of the lifting of taking the information that the finance department was providing and then putting it into something that's more graphically represented here and something that is pleasing to the eye to look at. This is our first year in doing it, so we know that it's going to be an evolution and an improvement year over year. But again, the goal is to try to make something that people can really get a sense of why we're doing what we're doing and what are the big items that are going into the budget, so that we're not necessarily trying to pull that out of the minutia of the numbers, but rather kind of having it, presented a little bit more clearly for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janessa so that she can walk through some of the highlights of things that you're going to see in the budget in brief.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Dave. Just an overall for everybody here, since I know several of us have seen the budget twice now. Many of us have seen it once fully through. Some of the high-level changes, too, from when we brought it to the study session a couple of weeks ago. Some positive changes we had talked about that day. We had gotten some, late entry information that we had that $3 million correction for purchase power. And that was something on MPPA's side, but that was a positive thing for the electric budget. And then we did do those recommended changes on the regulatory credits for broadband, which also was positive for about $300,000 too. So those were really the two key changes. But for everybody who may be listening tonight who hasn't walked through this budget, it really is a continuation budget in the sense of services, as Dave has mentioned too. However, we do look at everything line item every single year and make sure that the money that we're budgeting and earmarking by activity code and by account is truly what is needed to support our services for the next year. So that overall 2027 total budget came out to be $153,705,683. That results in about 12.8% increase over last year. And about 64% of the 100% of the increase, the biggest driver for sure was that fuel and purchase power again. So no big change from when we talked last time. You want to go ahead and scroll? Thanks, Becky. We did, again, and I was absolutely going to say this at the end, but thank you so much to Julie DeCook, our communications manager, who really took my numbers and ran with it to make it into a much easier digestible format for our citizens and our ratepayers, absolutely. So overall, what does that look like? So the majority, if you take the full budget, the majority of the budget goes to electric. That's about 79.4%. And then next would be wastewater at 9.6%, water at 8.5%, and then broadband at 2.4% of that overall. And then again, it just kind of gives a good highlight to everybody. Electric operations represent the largest portion, and that's really due to that fuel and purchase power cost required for delivering that electricity to the community too. So looking at electric specifically, scroll down here in my notes too. So the electric budget came out to about $122.1 million. Aside from that $3 million positive reduction that we talked verbally on but hadn't updated our PowerPoint last time since we had just learned of it that day, it's really no new content or meat to the information from when we talked last. Again, I want to in tandem kind of talk through some of the attachments, which include our proposed rate changes as well. So some of the rate changes on the electric side that impact this utility specifically. So no overall percentage rate increase, but we did have some changes to our rate D. Rate D, we deleted the energy only language and rate. That was a 2-year street lighting project to upgrade city lights, and it's been completed. So all lights have been moved and are now to full maintenance rate, so that rate's gone. For rate K, we also added renewable energy standard charges to MBT section. It basically added the new charge to be called renewable energy standard charge, and the rate's about $0.0007 per kilowatt hour. So that was added as well. One thing to also discuss is that LIEF surcharge that started last September. That's that low income energy assistant fund. There we go. Phew, that's a mouthful. That's the fund through the state of Michigan where they collect that on the bills for electric customers, and then they pass that through for assistance. That will change from $1.25 to $1.50. That's the only recommended change on the rate changes that will not change until September 1 bills. The rest of the rates will all change effective July 1. So that's the only atypical thing to point out there. But yeah, otherwise no overall rate increase or change for our electric partners.
And if I can just maybe
ahead.
add on rate K a minute,
Sure, go
Janessa's
ahead.
moving on to the next utility here. The rate K adjustments for that renewable energy charge are again on that market-based threshold. So only customers that are over that size level of either 20 megawatts for a single facility or 30, they kick into that market-based threshold where we're passing through the market cost to them. What we didn't have in there is we didn't have a mechanism to actually cover the costs if we had to acquire renewable energy credits on behalf of service to that customer, whereas maybe they didn't reach the threshold where we could use those credits under the state program. So that's really the carve out, so it's a very, very specific situation. So when we say rate K, we know we have a lot of customers that are industrial customers on rate K, but it's only really within that market-based threshold of that very large customer use that really applies to.
Perfect, thanks, Dave. As far as expense budget goes, again, majority of the expense changes are in fuel and purchase power, again, in this utility, which makes up 50% of the electric's budget. No debt issuances or anything planned for the electric utility either. The contribution to the city calculation remains unchanged, and that included about $9.8 million to the city this year as well, or about roughly 8% of the budget, which is similar percentage as prior years. That total capital budget for next year is also $16.6 million. About $6.4 million of that is considered electric production, and then about $10.2 million is electric distribution, with one of the main projects there being the underground to overhead line improvements, and that makes up about 50% of that at $5.3 million as well. Those will continue in this fiscal year too. So, any questions on electric or any changes? Okay, wonderful. Moving on to broadband. Broadband makes up about $3.7 million. When we last talked, that was $4 million, and that's where that $3 million credit, the regulatory credit, comes in to help relieve some of that depreciation expense. So it reduced slightly from when we last talked. Talking through that again, we do have on the revenue side 0%, no changes in our rates for broadband at all, but we do budget a 3% annual reduction in what we expect for that active Ethernet and dark fiber as those customers may transition over to the fiber internet service as it becomes available to them as well. Expenses, again, the majority here in this budget include other operating, which includes things like maintenance supplies and services, consulting, transit services, etc., and that makes up that $3.74 million. No new debt issuances or anything planned for broadband, and we did have the addition of 1 personnel in this fund. We do add 1 fiber optic field technician to help support the needs of the expanded network. Their overall capital budget for next year, no changes from when we last talked. It's at $1.9 million, and $1.6 million of that it makes up customer drops. So, and we just kind of detailed some information out for our ratepayers again of what the customer drop is. Bringing that fiber internet from the street directly to their home too. So, no other changes on broadband. The water budget is at $13.1 million. This is the final year of 3 planned 13% rate increases. Those were designed to stabilize our finances and support future infrastructure needs by building up some cash in that fund so that we could support some of our future capital plans as well. So that is a planned 13%. That did impact both readiness to serve and it also impacted the commodity charge as well. If she has anything to, nope, I think we're okay. On the expense side for the graph as well, the majority cross driver for the water system, again, as we've talked before too, are things like chemicals, maintenance services, things that you deem kind of in that other category, which is about 45.5%. No new debt issuances planned. The program was really just to, continue supporting and maintaining our public infrastructure, as well as focusing on that conservation efforts, and then the lead service line program as well. $11.7 million of capital planned, with $3.3 million considered to be water production. And then that includes things like certain updates to our water treatment plant, as well as, the chemical storage building that we're currently working on, and some of those third floor improvements as well. And then about $8.4 million is distribution, which is majority water main work within the community.
If I can take you back up maybe a page, if you would mind, just want to highlight something under the rate comparison, a little graphic there as well.
Oh, sure.
Janessa's talking about the revenue enhancements we've been doing over the last few years, and just for those that might be listening at home as well, the focus on those changes have been structured in a way to really do two things. One, yes, we need to raise the revenue, and part of the reason we're raising the revenue is to make sure that we can create a sustainable cash flow to fund the capital investments that need to be made in our water distribution main replacement, which is really being driven a lot by the regulatory constraint around the galvanized service line replacements in our community. But we've also structured it in a way where those that are receiving water for really kind of their base consumption needs, as opposed to irrigation, are not seeing significant percentage increases. And again, this year, that percentage increase on that base 4 CCF, or 400 cubic feet per month, which is typical of what you might experience needing for normal services outside of irrigation in a residential setting. That's only going up 5%. So the rest of it is where that's being hit on the irrigation, both on a business irrigation and the residential above kind of that base need. That being said, even when you look at that, the graphic here really shows that we still are out of other communities in Michigan that are serving water, that we have the 23rd lowest water rates throughout the state of Michigan, and still remain very competitive as a state, compared to the rest of the country. And so we're seeing news of a lot of utilities that are having revenue adjustments because infrastructure was put in for a lot of municipalities about 100 plus, a little over 100 years ago. And so this infrastructure renewal is coming due in a lot of areas, and the costs are going up significantly on those replacements. So just want to spend a minute just kind of highlighting that differential and that rate structure as well, so that we could talk through that. The other thing that putting that rate structure on the irrigation does is help people think a little bit more about their wise use of irrigation demand, because we're also trying to preserve the water plant capacity and not have to expand it while we're dealing with some of this other capital infrastructure renewal. So, yeah, I think, Scott, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation, because I was wondering that myself, and I was probably going to have a question later. But
Yeah.
so FY27, that 13% changes, it goes away.
After that, in the 5-year plan, we go to right now we're not asking for approval anything beyond this year, but we're forecasting is something more like a 5%, year after year after that. And part of the reason is, and one of the things that we want to do in this next year, Scott, is have a window beyond 5 years, because one of the things that we are looking at is eventually you do start to run into end-of-life issues for like the water intake line out at the water plant. Well, that's about an $80 million proposition to do a new intake line, but there are other things that are beyond the 5-year time horizon. Some of we're going to learn through this transmission main inspection process that we're doing as well, that we need to really kind of layer in and see once how our debt rolls off, and how we might be able to fund some new stuff on debt, and then what that might mean for more of a longer range plan for our revenues than just that 5-year window. We want to do it a little bit longer term to get a better sense of that.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, the graphic itself there, the 3 different colors, does it represent anything, or is it just visual?
I think it's more visual of the third, a third, Paul.
That's my guess too. Is
yeah,
the third. Exactly. I think it's a third. The other thing I think is important too to note is that the benchmarking in that graph is from January of this year. So many of our partners here across the state are also reviewing their rates as well too. So that our distribution could change in regard to their rate changes as well too. So
thank you.
Still very.
The graphics or the analysis is based on utilities serving over 10,000 in terms of population, not customer. There's about 100 of those, give or take, in the state. there's about another 1,600 that serve less than 10,000.
Yeah.
So if you take that, that's about 100% or 100.
Yeah, so if there's 100 there, and if every one of those breakpoints is about a third, then you'd have about 33, 66, and then 100. So you can see we're falling in that 23. We're on that south side of the 33 there. So that's kind of what the graphic shows in a very broad sense, I guess.
Thank you. For the wastewater utility, that budget is unchanged from when we talked last. That came out at about 14.8 million. For the rate changes for that as well, that's a 3% overall increase, and the distribution between that is 4.2% readiness to serve and 2% commodity change as well. For the expenses, you can see over here too, again, other expenses and is the majority driver of that budget over here in wastewater again too, things like chemicals, maintenance services, et cetera, that all kind of get lumped up in there. No debt issuances planned or anything for the wastewater utility. They have a capital budget of 11.5 million with about 6.2 million to be invested in the water reclamation facility. That's things like the continuing of the disinfection system upgrades, that UV system upgrade as well, and some building equipment upgrades as well too. And then another 5.3 million for water collection, and that's a lot of sewer main replacements along our community. One thing I did want to point out, and I know it was discussed the last time we talked too, is that there is a sewer main replacement project for the 40th Street sewer replacement that does have partial funding from LG accounted for as well in here too. So not all of the 5.3 million would be a obligation of the BPW. So that kind of brings us to the final slide, and I know Dave kind of talked through this as well too, but a big thank you to everybody. Well, it starts in October for a lot of the staff. My staff really start in August, preparing all the schedules and preparing a lot of the documentation that goes into building the scratch pads and stuff too for the budget. So big thank you, and a huge thank you again to Julie Cook, who's here as well, and she really did take, my vision and make this into a beautiful document for, I think, our customers and our ratepayers to use to kind of get the high level gist of our budget. So, any questions or anything?
Could we have a motion to approve this budget?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the fiscal year 2027 budget and associated rate adjustments and forward to the city council for inclusion in their resolution approving the budget for fiscal year 2027.
Support.
That's a motion by Lily, supported by Lynn. Any further discussion or questions?
Just going to add one more thing if I can, and that is, again, well, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about rate competitiveness on electric. It is important to point out. There's some notes in there in the budget and brief with regard to the competitiveness with other investor-owned utilities, but I will mention that every year American Public Power Association sends out a report kind of looking back at the federal forms that are filled out by every utility of every type, investor-owned utility, co-op, and municipal utility, in terms of the overall revenue received per kilowatt hour sold. And they do that both by the customer class and then an overall number. And we always have the people in our area from a municipal standpoint. When I say our area, I'm talking about Holland, Zeeland area, are served very well. The two of us have the lowest rates in Michigan across all different all different utility types. And it's a pretty decent margin, frankly, in terms of where we sit relative to that. And so I think our industrial rates are a little lower than Zeeland. Their residential rate is a little lower than us, but we're both in really great shape. So again, kudos to the staff and to the board in terms of financial planning on that. But something I wanted to highlight as well, just because of that electric competitiveness is very, very important in terms of an economic development, but it also just as solid across every customer class, so residents as well can expect to keep on average about $500 in their pocket compared to an investor-owned utilities customer, which also we saw just recently there was a a rate increase approved there for DTE for another 4.2%, and they're right back asking for another one again. So that's making news there as well. But just wanted to point that out when we're looking at this rate. No changes in electric really, except for the street lighting rate, and then that real large customer inclusion there. But just wanted to point out that competitiveness.
Thank you. Dave, and next steps for this budget?
Yeah, so what will happen here upon approval tonight is this goes on to City Council. The City Council has in mid-April sessions. They have a Wednesday night session, I believe, on April 15, if I'm not mistaken, and then the next night, continuation of that. Because of my schedule too, I've asked Keith, I think we're going to be presenting on the Thursday night. So we'll be coming in on that Thursday night, the second night of the budget presentations, and we'll be giving more of an overview of our budget in a study session process there. And then the first meeting that the council has in May, which I believe is the second week because of the tulip time schedule this year, will be like on somewhere around the teens of May, exactly which night that is. That's where the city council adopts a resolution that will actually take care of the budget and any rate adjustments. And it really is an inclusive budget of the entire city operations, including the Board of Public Works at that time.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The budget's passed. Thank you. Other business?
No other business from staff tonight, so we can move on to item 9 if you're
Please.
ready. Yeah, so, and it's very abbreviated here as well, just to point out that our next meeting is our study session on March 23. And our plan, I think there, unless I'm mistaken, we probably would be able to have February financials hopefully for that one. And then in addition to that, just on Friday, we did receive proposals, haven't reviewed those yet. They're still with our consultant. But we received proposals both for some local storage and some local battery energy solution type installations here that were recommended that we pursue underneath the results of the integrated resource plan. So we are reviewing that here this week and over the next coming weeks. Not that we're going to have any recommendation by our March study session, but we will be able to give you a little bit of a flavor of how that came out. At our March study session. And then our next regular meeting is April 6th. It's spring break week for a lot of people. For us, it is a scheduled meeting on April 6th. I will not be here. I'll be going off to attend eventually a conference that will be associated with the American Public Power Association. Ted will be sitting in for me for that meeting. So those are really the 2 items that I had for you tonight.
Thank you. Any communications from the board?
I have just one question to Dave I'd like you to address, and just broadly, in the news and some of the activity where the president was proposing to move forward on the big power consumers wanting to do developments and the concept of allowing them to generate and to build their own power supply elements. Any thoughts broadly on that? How do we sit in relationship to that?
Well, it was a pledge. There, what Paul's talking about last week, there was a roundtable discussion where there were 7 of the companies that really are involved with fairly large data center operations, and they all signed a pledge last week to essentially do what needs to be done to protect. It was a ratepayer protection pledge, and so what really is being discussed there is building their own generation or doing things from a rate structure standpoint that make sure that they protect the other ratepayers, and namely, primarily they're talking about residential customers. And there were concerns about some of these large loads increasing some of the costs from that standpoint. I'm encouraged that large customers are thinking in that regard. It's not out of alignment, frankly, from the way that we were looking at concentrated loads in our system, and frankly, that we've taken action to bifurcate a tariff in such a way where after a certain threshold, we're passing through a wholesale market so that we're not the ones taking a risk on the development of electric resources or long-term fuel supply, things like that, that might then create stranded costs to us and risks associated with that. So I'm encouraged that many others in that area are thinking along those same lines. Now, that being said, I think we have to also be cognizant of the fact that demand for electricity, whether or not there's a ratepayer protection pledge or not, adds to the supply and demand relationship of some of these resources, right? And so the fact that there's a 5-year waiting time frame for combustion turbines right now is an indication that these loads are out there. And that means that cost structures for the supply of those new resources are going to go up. So whether we're building those for our own demands outside of these concentrated loads, or it's being built to address those data centers, the electric utility is seeing cost pressures due to it. And that's not something a ratepayer protection pledge can really deal with, because it's more of a symptom of overall supply and demand than it is a factor of, specifically what would the tariff look like, or what could a particular load sort of do to mitigate impacts in one utility area. So, there's going to be challenges out there, from the supply of new generation resources, as well as we're seeing it on lead times and costs associated with some of the higher voltage connection equipment, right? We talked about that on transformers and some of the switches that are out there. So I think you see some things that are more sort of symptomatic of that bigger supply-demand picture, but encouraging to see that those that are stepping up to say that we need some of this power are also stepping up to say that we want to try to find the solutions in terms of being on the hook for the risks associated with building out some of this generation supply and de-risking it for the rest of the customers. Hopefully that answers your question, Paul, but that's sort of my perspective on it.
Addressing it from the standpoint of how that might affect our customers in the future, that beyond 5 years that you were talking about, that's one of the elements I think would need to be included in that vision,
Yeah,
so to speak.
yeah.
And then I think the other part of it is that other areas of the country, I think Amazon has got some places in the Southwest that they have been able to successfully put in solar to meet 90% of their load or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just a different world.
It is, and I think the other thing you're pointing out, and certainly as it relates to data centers, is not just about electric supply, it's also about cooling, and it's about water use as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors that are in play when you start thinking about service to them. So now, we're hearing different things from different data centers that we've talked to, or that are talking to the Joint Action Agency that serves us, because they're helping to sort of be a mediator, or a good sounding board for the municipalities that they support as well. That there's some out there that recognize one path could be that they interrupt load, if there's not enough resources out there, and their design is sort of building a number of different areas so that they can shut down to mitigate some of that resource adequacy need, right? So there's that aspect, but then I think there's also innovative solutions that they're thinking about as it relates to some of the cooling demands as well. So I expect there'll be continued dialogue on that and evolution as some of those data centers work through those issues.
Any other communications from the board? Could we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
It's a motion by Lilly, supported by Enbergs. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned.